Good evening, everybody. I'm here back again to talk a little bit about the best technologies for each leader. This is kind of a sequel to the video I did earlier as the best card for each leader. That video's title is a little bit misleading because it's not really so much the best card for each leader as it is the cards that hint that one particular leader may be good. You should pick this leader if, maybe, is a better framing device for it. Because the best card for each leader, is all the best cards anyway. The Kwisatzus and the Web of Powers. Web of Powers is the best card for half the leaders in the game. And this is going to be something similar. The technologies that you see in the opening row that will help you decide to pick one leader or another. The technologies, unlike the cards, there's a lower variance. Every technology has a use case, and every technology is good sometimes, and the great ones are not so great that they're overpowering. But it is worth talking about. This is basically me explaining what my thought process when I open a game and what causes me to pick which leaders. I pretty quickly can scan the row and scan the text and say, okay, this leader will be good, this leader will be bad. And this is kind of what that is. Going in reverse order this time, we're going to talk about Yuna Moritani. Yuna is fantastic with Flagship. Now, Flagship, you have to always put this asterisk on it because it's so expensive. 8 spice is a lot to pay for a tech. If you're buying it at tech negotiation, you're really probably only paying 7, but it's still a very expensive technology. The most expensive technology in the game, and it's not super close. But if you can get there with a Appropriate or with an X-Guild Compact or any kind of additional spice bonus like Esmartuek with Yuna, you're going to be very happy with your purchase. Besides the fact that it gives you a point, which is 1/9 of what you need to win the game on this leader who doesn't necessarily have the easiest time finding points on the board, it also gives you a very, very efficient way to use Yuna's Solari. It takes Yuna probably an action or two fewer to generate 4 Solari, maybe more like 1 action fewer, than it does for the other leaders. So she can very easily turn a flagship into a dominant combat advantage. And then again, the combat advantage is good because Yuna, although she's great at generating Solari, isn't always great at finding points on the board. So this helps with that in 2 different ways. So if you see a flagship out, you can definitely think about it when you see Yuna. You shouldn't pick Yuna in, 3rd or 4th position just because there's a flagship. But if you can find a way to get it online early, especially after you get your Swordmaster, this is a more efficient way to spend Solari than her Signet Ring generally, unless you're able to steal an alliance with it, which I don't try to mess around with that stuff if I can help it. Okay, next is Duke Leto. Leto, like many leaders on this list that we're going to see, his best technology is Mimicorders. Mimicorders is a absolutely fantastic technology that both halves of it are efficient enough to be worth the cost. So when you put them together, it kind of ends up being the strongest tech in the game. For Leto in particular, the faction bump helps him with his early game. He's already going to have bumps on guild and wherever he feels like getting them from his ring, and the Mimic just make that even easier. And Leto, of all the leaders, is probably the one that's most guaranteed to get the Mimic Order's point because he's going to get so much faction influence that it's fairly easy for him to finish the quest on the card. But if we ignore that, because Mimic Orders is the best technology for almost every leader, well, not almost every leader, but it's in general the best technology. We could also say that Shuttle Fleet is very good for Leto. It helps him with his alliance racing with the 2 bumps. He can combine the Shuttle Fleet with a purchase using his ring to go up 2 with a single faction. If he's buying the Shuttle Fleet from the shipping track, then he can potentially go up with 3 different factions. 1 from the Shuttle Fleet, 1 from his ring, and 1 from the track itself. The same thing is true with Mimic Orders. Mimic Orders with ring on shipping is 3 bumps with a faction. So these are... Leto is kind of about alliance stealing to some extent, and these are the techs that are best for that. On top of that, Shuttle Fleet is a great Leto technology because Leto's Solari is more efficient than every other leader's Solari. Yuna gets more Solari, but Leto can use it more efficiently. A single pop of Shuttle Fleet is 2 uses of Mentat for Leto. It's very, very nice. And after a mere 2 rounds of having this technology, Leto can already afford to buy a High Council seat. So it's a great technology for him in multiple ways. I wouldn't pick Leto just because this was in the row, but if you do see it, it's definitely worth thinking about for him. Okay, Beast Raban. So for Beast Raban, I think the best tech is Wind Traps. Although I do have sort of the 2 on it circled and pointed to because I think the relevant thing for Beast Raban is that he starts with a spice. And what this means is, unlike all the other leaders that start with spice, even the other technology-oriented ones like Memnon and Romber, Beast is guaranteed to be able to get any 2 technology costs or 2 spice technology that he wants in the first round. He can guaranteed get it so long as tech negotiation is not blocked. Unlike Memnon and Romber, who need to draw their rings, and Alaa, who needs to hit it in our second action, Beast can do it first action, second action, whenever he wants, every time. So the 2-cost technologies are good for him. Now, not all the 2-cost technologies are good for him. Troop transports isn't going to provide a lot of value for a long time, for example, and I'm skeptical of Sonic Snoopers for Beast Raban. But Wind Traps, Mimicorders, Mimic Film are all fantastic technologies for Beast Raban, and the relationship is strong enough that you actually do consider picking Raban if you see those technologies in the row. Wind Traps gives special, is especially good for Raban because of his combat proclivities. It's possible for you to use Wind Traps to snowball games, repeatedly hit Hardy Warriors, because the Wind Traps pays for future Hardy Warriors visits when you win combats. It's a fun playstyle if you can get it to work, and this is a very good technology for him. But the relevant thing is that the technology costs 2 and is worth something. Okay, so for Ilban, we have Holtzman Engine. Holtzman Engine is a fantastic technology that it provides long-term value for any leader, but it's usually not worth getting over your Swordmaster. Usually Swordmaster is going to be more valuable. Ilban is kind of the exception to this because Ilban can substitute Swordmaster for repeat Mentat visits. So he's able to make do without the Swordmaster, and then he already orients his game plan around getting Spice Must flows. So the Holtzman Engine is just sort of rewarding him for what he already wants to do. So I think, for most Ilban games, Holtzman Engine is the best technology for him. And that's even true, versus Mimicorders. I think Holtzman Engine is genuinely a great technology for Ilban. Usually I'll try to get it after Swordmaster if I can, but you can go no Swordmaster, get Holtzman, and it's a totally valid strategy that will often work well for you. Especially if you can get, a Guild Bankers or something. Okay. Romber. Romber is sort of a weird one to list a technology for, because Romber is the technology leader. He is the one that has the most access to all of these technologies. And there's an argument to using just about any of them with Romber Vernius. So don't think that Romber is you gotta pick Romber if there's an invasion ships. But invasion ships is the technology that Romber gets more out of than any other leader. And the reason for that, there's 2 reasons for that. But the first reason is that when you buy invasion ships with Romber's Ring, which isn't hard to do, all you have to do is go to, the Great Flat when it has 2 accumulated spice. That's 5 spice, right? Go there with your ring, you've got 5, you can immediately buy the invasion ships. Or you can have negotiators stored up or some to spare or whatever. But when you buy the invasion ships, this gives you 4 troops immediately, and you're already on a combat space, so you can then immediately deploy the troops in the combat. You can also use this with his ring on a city space for the same effect if you just have the spice already. 4 troops is almost as much as a highliner, so Romber's got an additional way to kind of pull a highliner out, especially if he gets blocked from the space in the late game. And then there is the long-term value from invasion ships discarding cards to infiltrate spaces. Romber certainly would love to infiltrate interstellar shipping because he's most likely to have, not most likely, but he frequently wants to have 2 on guild so that he can buy techs on the cheap from the track. So the invasion ships are a great little trick for Romber Vernius to do. You can also do this with machine culture, but Romber is much more consistent about it. And he can use it to sneak out some combat wins that otherwise people thought couldn't be stolen. So for Memnon here, I have 3 technologies. It's unusual to do this many honorable mentions, but in my tournament game in the 4th prelim game, I had a game where I played Memnon and I got all 3 of these, and it was just the absolute perfect thing because these are the 3 Memnon technologies, and getting them all together in a game is kind of unusual. So I'm just going to talk about all of them. The first one is Mimicorders. Mimicorders is good for any leader that can produce spice in the first round. This is Memnon, Alaa, Beast, for the most part. But for Memnon in particular, Mimicorders is even a little bit better because, in my opinion, unlike Romber Vernius, or Aleza Ikaz. Well, unlike Aleza, Memnon can hit it on his first action, although he probably shouldn't. And unlike Romber, Memnon has other things that combo with the Mimic Orders. He also gets a connections bump from getting High Council eventually, and this extra bump is going to mean that Memnon is more competitive for the endgame point than other leaders. Oftentimes, Memnon triggers the connections bump in the second half of the game, and at that point he can know what he needs to hit his Mimic Order's point and put the bump where it needs to go. So Memnon giving him 2 different Omni faction bumps is very handy, and it helps him start off to a great start. You take Guild with the Mimic Orders bump, you go to full space on the first action, and now you have uncontested interstellar shipping. If you're going first position, you can do this with some degree of consistency, and you can even do it in the second position sometimes, if the first player doesn't go to full space. Although at that point, you're risking getting tech negotiation blocked. This is if you have your ring, of course. The second one is Disposal Facility. And all these techs kind of work well together, but Disposal Facility is good because Memnon is already going to High Council. He's already kind of going into a semi-deck building route. And the Disposal Facility is sort of a deck building intensifier. It basically makes you into Armand. And Armand, who gets Spice just sort of passively and has extra faction bumps, is a really strong leader. Memnon, if he has a High Council seat, is almost always going to be able to clear his Disposal Facility on his reveal turn. And to make things better, he'll be able to trash down to his good cards. You can use the Disposal Facility to trash your daggers, which means you're able to trigger Disposal Facility more often in the future. So it's a self-reinforcing technology, which is really handy. The third technology that is good for Memnon is Restricted Ordnance. Memnon is the only leader in the game that really has any particular proclivity towards High Council. And Restricted Ordnance is a very powerful tech that's situationally good. So Memnon, he has the Spice that's going to help him get the Restricted Ordnance sooner. And then he also has a strategic tendency to already be hitting the High Council seat. So all 3 of these technologies are great for Memnon. And if you see them, you can turn Memnon from a, medium tier to a very good leader. And that's how you kind of get these situational leaders into good spots. So yeah. Next is Aleza. Aleza is hard to mention because Aleza, you pick her for the most part when there are point-granting technologies. Aleza generates resources passively, but she doesn't really produce points in any way. And she doesn't have a clear route to points. So you have to find a way to turn Solari and Spice, given slowly but constantly, into points. And I think, I could have mentioned Detonation Devices is good for Aleza, Flagship is good for Aleza, Mimic Orders is good for Aleza, Holtzman Engine, Spy Satellites. Spy Satellites is the best in my opinion. Spy Satellites is the second best technology in the game, and it's fairly easy for Aleza to play a game where she is putting aside daggers and reconnaissances and getting Spice for the Spy Satellites and not hitting faction spaces, which makes the Spy Satellites a good way for her to harvest value in the long run. Next is Hundra with troop transports. Oh, another thing is that Aleza can generate 2 Spice by round 2 using 1 step ahead, which is faster than Romber or Memnon, which means that she can hypothetically get Spy Satellites sooner, even though, generally speaking, this is not technology that you want to rush. Okay. Hondro, I'm going to say troop transports. This one's a little bit weird because troop transports is a win more technology. That sounds bad. Win more is bad in a lot of situations and a lot of games. But in Dune, players are often trying to pull you down, so being able to win more can sometimes take you away from contention to a win. And it sounds contradictory because one of the advantages of Hondro is that he can use his signet ring to smuggle down at cities and at spice spaces and deploy additional troops to the combat that other players cannot do. So isn't that already giving you what troop transports is offering? And the answer is yes. But I think the reason that this tech is stronger for Hondro in particular is very frequently this guy just is the leader that ships the most in the game, more than anyone else. He often will build his deck and his playstyle around his ring, and the more times you can get to that second tier of the shipping track, the more useful this is going to be because it provides extra troops and it doesn't force you to spend a spice for your ring to use it. And Hondro is considerably better than other leaders at hitting the second space of the technology track consistently. The other thing is that Hondro has a very easy time getting to the third tier of the technology track, which would give him troop transports for free. So this is a very good snowball technology for Hondro. Baron, I don't want to spend too much time on this. If Baron or Tessia get mimic orders. It's not a game over, but it does make the game a much more difficult. It helps them close out the game quickly, and then having an extra point at the end game if the game goes long blunts some of the lower momentum that these characters have, by making them more consistent in the long run. So Baron, I mean, is very, very dangerous if he gets mimic orders. It helps him seal alliances, and the point goes without saying. Tessia, same deal. These two are kind of mirrors of each other. Tessia, in my opinion, has an easier time actually getting mimic orders to go off, because the way that her snoopers work mean that she's always going to be generally at 2 with every single faction, which means that getting that extra 1 on the others is pretty trivial. And then the fact that this technology provides a bump means if Tessia buys this with her ring, she can go up 2 with a single faction and get a power play. Or if she buys it from the shipping track, she can go up 2 with a faction. If she buys it from the shipping track with her ring, she could hypothetically go up 3 with a faction. So it helps her get her snoopers faster. It gives her an in-game point. It's pretty dangerous in general. And you shouldn't, if you see these leaders, you should not let them have mimic orders. You need to play active blocker to prevent them from having it, in my opinion. Okay, for Arman de Kaz, the best technology is spy satellites. There's a few reasons for this. Arman likes to sort of durdle and spin his wheels and, be at 1 or 2 victory points until the last 2 rounds and then go to like 15 victory points. And spy satellites is kind of perfect for that playstyle because it allows Armand to catch up on the factions that he was ignoring because he was trying to trigger coordination. If you can get alternate ways of scoring points that don't involve factions on Armand, this becomes very powerful. And Armand is generally a little bit better at doing that. Armand can trash down to the opulence and draw it over and over and over again. Or he can trash down to the Sayadina or pick up the Sayadina with his ring, and then focus the Fremen Alliance and then use the spy satellites for the other factions that he was ignoring. So spy satellites is just a perfect fit for Armand. It's a great technology in general, but it's great for him as well. For Paul, I have holo projectors. Paul is kind of the opposite of Aleza, where he doesn't really care that much about what the technologies are. He cares a lot more about the Imperium row, where Aleza doesn't care that much about the Imperium row and cares more about the technologies. Paul is the reverse. And the reason that I have holo projectors here is because Paul knows what he will draw when he uses his holo projectors. So sometimes with holo projectors, you're taking a gamble. You're saying, well, I might draw my diplomacy, and that could be bad because I need to play that next round. But at the same time, I'm going to be shuffling my deck, and maybe I pick up some persuasion. You're making these sort of calculations when you have holo projectors, and Paul knows exactly what the value is going to be. He knows if he throws away a dagger, he's going to draw into convincing or whatever, and in general, it provides him better value than the other leaders. Paul is also good at picking up the sort of mid to high cost unload cards, like Esmar Tuek in particular, and also the Guild Accord. So if Paul gets those cards and he's a little bit better at getting them than other leaders, he can use holo projectors to just print an insane economic engine. And that covers up for the weakness that Paul has, where he doesn't really produce resources. You can use holo projectors plus a good unload card to make Paul into an economic leader. For Ariana, I have artillery. To be honest, there's not really a best technology for Ariana. If I had to, give one example, I might say spy satellites. Maybe we could repeat from Armand the spy satellite suggestion. But I put artillery here because I wanted to reflect the fact that Ariana is innately bad at buying technologies. She's just worse at it than other leaders. The reason for this is that she gathers spice at a lower rate than everybody else. So where, any leader in the game, hypothetically, can go hog a basin and pick up a disposal facility round 1 off of tech negotiation, although it's not very common that you want to do this. Ariana cannot. She's the only leader that can't do something like that. She has a harder time picking up all the technologies than every other leader, but artillery is the only technology in the game that every leader, including Ariana, can pick up on the first round of the game without having to gather any spice at all. So Ariana has a little bit of an indication towards artillery. And then also, Ariana tends to like to buy medium to high cost cards oftentimes Fremen cards and Fremen decks. I would say of all the leaders, Ariana is the one that's most tilted towards a Fremen deck, besides maybe Ilbon or Leto. So, if she's buying a lot of Spice Hunters, if she's buying Fatican Death Commandos, this artillery, which doesn't require any extra effort for Ariana to pick up, can end up working out well for her. And then she often does end up going to spice spaces, which will allow her to deploy troops. So there's a relationship there, although in general, I would say that as Ariana, you don't want to be looking at the technologies all that often. And if there are good technologies in the row, it's a sign that maybe you shouldn't be playing Ariana in this game. Okay, Helena is the last one I have here, and Helena is really good with Disposal Facility. So Disposal Facility is a really fun tech that doesn't see all that much play. It's maybe, a mid value to below average value technology, but with Helena specifically, it's very good. And the reason is that these two just kind of fit together like peanut butter and jelly. Helena is good at selecting high quality cards and getting them into her deck. But unlike Armand, she does not have any sort of way of trashing out the bad cards. So most Helena decks look like a mix of really, really good cards and then some crap, basically. Some daggers and some Dune the Desert Planets or some experimentations. And what Disposal Facility does is it allows Helena to make her deck as consistent as Armand's, or maybe a little bit less, but close to as consistent as Armand's. But it also allows her, while keeping all of her other advantages, right? And again, like I've talked about, trashing intensifies in value based on how good your deck is. So Helena is kind of on one end of that spectrum, where she's got a very high quality deck a lot of the time, but she doesn't have any good ways to trash. And Disposal Facility fixes that problem for her. I have bought Disposal Facility round 1 with Helena before. It was one of the most fun games I've ever played. It was probably the coolest game I've ever uploaded on my channel. Super, super interesting game. But usually you're not going to rush this technology. You want to pick it up between rounds 3 to 5. Ideally I'd say 2 to 3, but or 2 to 4. But realistically, you're probably not going to be getting this in round 2. So don't get it ahead of your Swordmaster most of the time unless you have a Jessica or something. But it's a fantastic tech for Helena. Okay, now for the other technologies that I didn't mention. I just want to talk about them a little bit, just to make this a little bit more useful for the other, for people who want to hear about technologies in general. Some of these technologies are here because they're bad. Some of these technologies are here because they just don't fit into one particular playstyle super well, even if they are good. The first one, Mnemonic Film, is going to be an example of that. Mnemonic Film is a great technology, and it's good with a couple number of leaders. Romber Vernius, Beast Raban, Laza Ikaz are all good examples. But they all had another technology that was more synergistic than Mnemonic Film. So even though Mnemonic Film is in the top third of technologies in terms of value, it doesn't really have one particular home when it comes to leaders. Next is Detonation Devices. Detonation Devices is weird. It's one of the most difficult technologies to use effectively. And I think it's not something you want to go for in most games until you're very familiar with the game. However, it is a really fun alternative wind condition that can be powerful. And I think it's best on Beast Raban of all the leaders, because Beast starts with both a Solari and a Spice. And the best way to use Detonation Devices is to go to the crappy Dreadnought space and buy both the tech and the Dreadnought. And Beast Raban makes that a little bit easier to do than any other leader. Plus, he already has a combat proclivity, so it's not difficult to get the point. If you buy Detonation Devices with Raban, you can be fairly confident that eventually you'll get the point, if you get it early enough. It's also great with Romber Vernius, as everybody already knows, and it can be good with Laza Ikaz as well, who has a trickle of Spice and Solari with which to afford the Dreadnought, and also the technology. Next is Chimurki. Chimurki is a really interesting and strange technology that I think is very good, but it's completely, orthogonal to the leaders. It doesn't have anything to do with the leaders for the most part. Maybe in Bloodlines, it can be with Piter de Vries or something like that, but in general, Chimurki has almost the same value proposition for every leader. You get 2 intrigue cards, that's worth about a point usually, and then you also win tiebreakers. Really handy thing to have. You don't want to rush it, but it is great to show up, especially because with games where the players are equally skilled, a lot of the time the games do end in tiebreaker, and Shimarki can win you the game. Getting it early can be useful if you draw Grand Conspiracy, or if you draw Chome Shares, or if you draw a card that requires a lot of planning, it can be good to have it early. But I still don't think you should rush it. With almost every technology on this list, I'm going to tell you that you should not prioritize it above Swordmaster. But once you have your Swordmaster, then look at these technologies after that. Unless you think that you're not going to get Swordmaster based on tempo, then you can explore other options. Holtzman Engine and Shuttle Fleet are kind of an exception there. Sonic Snoopers. Sonic Snoopers is a weird technology. I always go back and forth on if it's good or not. I think it is not for the most part. I think you don't want to rush this. Intrigue cards are great, but Snoopers is bad. Is kind of, it's also when more kind of like what Troop Transports is doing, where the more intrigue cards you have, the better Snoopers is, except Snoopers has more value to people who get unlucky and draw bad intrigue cards. So it's kind of a nice panacea in that regard. I don't think any particular leaders want this. The two best ones for it, though, are the Harkonnen leaders, Beast Raban and the Baron. Baron, because he just generates more intrigue cards than every other leader, so he's going to end up picking up some bad ones. Snoopers will eventually have value for that. Snoopers is a cool technology, but I would not... just be careful. If you have a machine culture or you have a Ixen engineer, make sure you're not trashing the Snoopers before you trigger those effects. And for Beast Raban, it's okay because you can buy it in round 1 or you can buy it earlier on. I don't really like this strategy that much. I've heard it bandied about as like a cool sort of gambling based strategy where you go to Carthag and you buy Snoopers, and then you have the ability to look at like 4 intrigue cards or whatever, and that's cool. But I'm not sold on it. I've tried it and I wasn't impressed. Last is Spaceport, or not last, but next to last is Spaceport. This is the worst tech in the game. It's really, really bad. You should never buy Spaceport unless it's a late game gambit to get a Chome Directorship, or to get a Spice Must Flow, or something to that effect, where you need to draw cards desperately, and you're so desperate to draw cards, and Research Station isn't available, and Mentat's gone, and maybe Air Keen's not enough. If at that point you can afford to pay 5 spice to draw 2 cards, go for it. I have seen some very, very niche situations where somebody uses a Spaceport to draw 2 cards and pick up a really high value card like a Kwisatz or a Jessica, put it on top of their deck, and then use it immediately. If you're in the 1 in 100 or 1 in 200 game where that can happen, knock yourself out. That's really cool. I love it. But that doesn't happen very often. Almost ever. This is not good for any leader. The leader it's hypothetically best for is like Paul, because Paul knows what the Spaceport will draw him, but he doesn't even know that because he only knows the top card, not the 2 cards that he'll draw. So I recommend against buying Spaceport, and if you see Spaceport in the row, that's a sign that you should move away from leaders like Romber or not Tessia. Move away from leaders like Romber or Aleza, who like technologies, and towards leaders like Armand or Paul, who focus on other strategies. And then Training Drones is the last one. Training Drones, to me, is a very middle-of-the-road, flat, sort of average technology. It's fun when it works. It's good with the combat strategies. It's great if you can combo it with wind traps. I don't like rushing it early, though. The problem with buying a Training Drones is that even though the blocks are always going to be useful, you just do not know... You do not know if the combats are going to go your way. If the round 7 combat is a Grand Conspiracy, or sorry, not Grand Conspiracy, Grand Vision, you're going to be sad that you bought the Training Drones. And sometimes, you get a Guild Bank raid in round 5 or round 6, and then Training Drones isn't that useful either. The ability for it to store troops between rounds is really cool, and eventually you'll get a value out of those. It's great if you can pick it up early, but I would say don't rush it. If the stars align, Training Drones can be really fun and really good, but don't force the technology. Anyway, that's me talking about every technology in the game, and talking about every leader in the game and which technology I think works best with them. If you guys want to hear more about technologies from a different angle, or different situations, or card combos, or tier lists, or whatever, let me know, but I think this is pretty exhaustive, all things considered. You've seen me play with these technologies in my games before. Yeah, hope you guys have a great day, and let me know what you think.